I have always been a reader. I do not remember the process of learning how to read, but I can clearly remember my dad climbing in bed with me to tell me stories. My parents were always reading to me as a kid. We still have some of my favorites on a bookshelf in their house, and most of them are torn and faded from overuse. Many of them are classics, like Elizabeth Winthrop's Bear and Mrs. Duck, Don Freeman's Corduroy, and Robert McCloskey's Make Way for Ducklings. My memories then skip to reading all the time. I even had the nerdy Harry Potter-style glasses to prove it. My mom would take me to the public library, and I would read all of the books and want more before the 2 weeks were up. I loved the Boxcar Children's series, the Magic Treehouse series, anything written by Beverly Cleary, and silly shorter books with characters like Junie B. Jones and Amelia Bedelia. My dad had passed on his love of science fiction to me, so I also read the Star Wars Young Jedi Knight series. Basically, my parents spent a fortune at the bookstore, and I was happy. I read everywhere, in the car, at school, on the couch, at the dinner table, on the beach, in bed under the covers. You name the place, I probably read there. As I got older, my parents were always harassing me to go to sleep at a better time, but I always wanted to read more. In middle school, I even got desperate enough to read in the bathroom in the middle of the night for better lighting and less questions. It worked. Because of my overwhelming attachment and love for books, I was one of the high flyers in school. My teachers were always impressed by my spelling and vocabulary knowledge, which led to advanced classes and wonderful suggestions for reading at home. I was introduced to the most beautiful stories and characters, and I loved them all. Some are depicted here in a painting created for me by a former student. I remember bawling in my sister's bedroom as I read Where the Red Fern Grows, and loving the adventures of Jo, Beth, Meg, and Amy in Little Women. I still don't think Laurie and Amy belong together. Also, the Winona Ryder film does not do the book justice. I also recall throwing To Kill a Mockingbird across the room out of anger and disgust toward the town of Macomb. In middle school, I was on the Battle of the Books team, which introduced me to even more wonderful books, and a variety of genres. I read Joan Lowry Nixon's The Other Side of Dark, which led me to the predictable but fun-to-guess Mary Higgins Clark mysteries. Robin McKinley's The Blue Sword was a fast favorite because of my love for fantasy. I recently found an old copy in one of my many used bookstore ventures and was so excited. High school led me to deeper texts, but my busy schedule kept me from reading as much as I wanted. Due to several unfortunate teachers, I missed out on classics like The Great Gatsby and The Crucible, but loved the exposure to In Cold Blood, Haroun and the Sea of Stories, Les Miserables, and East of Eden. Because of these heavier texts for school, my free time reading moved to superfluous fiction like the Gossip Girl series and other great young adult fiction like Scott Westerfield's series about the uglies, pretties, specials, and more. College as an English major exposed me to texts I was less familiar with, but I didn't complain. I took an adolescent fiction class that rocked my world. It was heaven. Just to name a few, we read Laurie Halse Anderson's Winter Girls, Melina Marchetta's Jellicoe Road, obscure but a must-read, and Jay Asher's 13 Reasons Why. I cannot write about my reading life without discussing Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling molded my childhood in a way I cannot ever quite put into words. I started reading the books in 4th grade when my aunt gifted me with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for Christmas. This became even more significant to me when she passed away 2 years ago from cancer. She was a teacher and had heard a lot about the series, and I do not exaggerate when I say my life was forever changed. I caught up on the series and then insisted that my parents take me to every midnight release following. The movie started soon after, and I went to every midnight release of them as well. I was a sophomore in high school when the final book was released, and I stayed up all night and did not stop reading until I was done. I ate, napped, and then read it again. I visited fan sites and watched any interview with J.K. Rowling I could in the few days following to learn more about her decision-making process, the future of the characters, and more. Since then, I reread 3 to 4 of the books each year and indulge in the movies regularly. But I swear, I'm a normal human. I was fortunate enough to visit the wizarding world of Harry Potter at Christmas and cried when I walked into Diagon Alley. Someone had made my favorite story settings into reality, and I was overwhelmed to walk through them. It was a dream come true. In that same trip, I got to visit Belle's library at Disney World, and the 4-year-old me was in heaven. I know I've spent a great deal of space writing and talking about reading, but because of its immense impact on my life, I can't really help it. I love the feeling of a book in my hands. My husband bought me a Kindle for my birthday last year, and I have mixed feelings about it. The instant access is great and dangerous, but there's something about the texture of the pages and the smell of the binding that makes me swoon. I'm currently working my way through a long to-read list based on recommendations from friends and colleagues. I normally pick one a month, and I'm doing my best to read a little bit each day outside my graduate school work. For now, summers and vacation is the only time I really have to read, but I will always make time for my favorite pastime, especially when it means sharing it with the next generation. Due to my love of reading, writing became natural to me. I kept journals as a child. I even named one Kitty in homage to Anne Frank, and recorded everything. I remember one time that I was really angry with my dad and wrote about it in my journal. My mom found it and lectured me about what to put into writing. Several years ago, I found an excerpt from October 25th, 2000, the year we got our first pet, Bailey. I said, "My favorite dog is my dog Bailey. I love him very much. He is trained. Bailey is really happy when we are with him, but when we are not there, he is scared. I know because once when I was heading out the door, he whined. So I love my dog, and he loves me." I also loved writing stories. One time I made a picture book I made for my kindergarten class. I told the story about the time I got lost in the Belks at South Park Mall. I wrote stories for fun too. My love for Star Wars spilled over into my writing, and I wrote pages of adventures for Luke, Leia, Hans, and Chewie. They were terrible, but it was fun. I was very discouraged about my writing in the 4th grade when I failed the North Carolina writing test. My teachers couldn't believe it, saying I was one of her strongest writers, but the fact that someone didn't think I was good enough really got me down. She used my writing portfolio to promote me to 5th grade, and everything was fine, but my spirit was a little crushed. In middle school, the entrance of social media, AOL Instant Messenger, and email impacted my writing. I hate confessing that I wrote in text slang, BRB, LOL, where are you, see you later, the works. But it was only in these situations that I used the language. In school, I still continued to write correctly. Before downloading Instant Messenger on my computer, my dad made me an email address that I could use to communicate with friends, but he told me to be careful and promised to monitor everything to make sure I was safe. Kudos to Dad for his digital citizenship talks. During 8th and 9th grade, I attempted to write a young adult novel with my friend Carrie. It started one night at a sleepover and occupied a few of our summers. This was way before Google Drive existed, so we emailed the Word document back and forth. We gave each other feedback, wrote new material, and changed character names and plot lines a few times. It was nothing special, and I don't remember why we stopped writing, but I'm pretty sure she still has the 200+ pages we wrote on a flash drive somewhere. It was a fun experiment, and I like thinking back to the late nights I spent hunched over the keyboard, typing, trying to write a story in a dark room, long after I was supposed to be in bed. I also wrote a good bit of dark, angsty teenage poetry during the preteen, early teen years. I wrote ballads about broken hearts, tributes to friends who passed away, and messages to God about things I didn't understand. I published some of it on poetrypoems.com and had a few pieces featured in the school's literary magazine, but I didn't write poems for long. In 10th grade, I joined the journalism staff at my school and took the class for 6 straight semesters. I wrote hundreds of articles during these 3 years, and I learned a lot about writing, too. Several lessons I learned include active and passive voice, the importance of word choice, the value of revision, and the overuse of the word that. I loved the time I spent as editor-in-chief of the newspaper, and this experience had me considering a journalism degree for several months. Editing helped me learn what I wanted in my own writing and helped me hone in on my voice. There's so much I loved about this experience, but more than anything, I loved that this class forced me to write and practice the craft daily. College was consumed by writing papers for class, but I did attempt to blog on several occasions. They failed over time, but it was a great space to reflect and put my thoughts out there. One of the college classes I loved was my creative writing class on prose. We wrote free writes each class in response to fabulous off-the-wall prompts, which helped me write about topics I never would have explored without my professor's guidance. In that class, I wrote my first full-length short story. Each student's story went through a workshop process, and I gained valuable feedback from my peers. I posted a photo of the 20 copies of my story on Instagram the day of my peer review, and it was the most nervous I'd ever been. Since leaving the college life, I've worked to be more intentional about setting aside time for writing. It felt like my first year of teaching was filled with writing lesson plans and names on wedding invitations, but after getting past both of those milestones, it has been much better. Most of my writing at this point is done on a digital capacity. I have a functioning blog right now with several series to keep me focused, but I also write about various happenings in our life. In November, I purchased a domain name so that I no longer use blah-blah-blah.wordpress.com, and I think that investment has pushed me to write more frequently. I am an avid user of Twitter and Instagram, so shorter thoughts end up there. I love the opportunity to interact with people on social media, and it's connected me to people I would have never met or followed otherwise. By now, you've probably come to understand how much of an English nerd I am. I really think this shows how these elements have really shaped me as a person and helped me discover who I am. From the angsty teenage poetry and Junie B. Jones stories, to a teacher who uses technology in her classroom on a daily basis, writes blog posts, and recommends books to friends. I think it's a true testament to my goal as a lifelong learner, as a consumer and participant in multiple forms of literacy, and I hope I never lose the passion I have for them. Thanks for listening.